Behind me are the beaches of Normandy. And there's a kid fishing and a kid playing in the water. But little do they know, on June 6, 1944, the Allied forces look to invade these beaches and knock the Germans out of France, once and for all. Hi, I'm Matthew Settle, and this is Decisive Battles. The overall commander of the Allies was Eisenhower, while the lead commander of the ground forces was Montgomery. Opposing them on the German side was Rommel, who was famous from North Africa. And with all these great commanders colliding, it was bound to be a great battle. Got it.
The Allies had an amphibious assault planned for the beaches of Normandy. On these beaches, they were sectioned into 5 different areas: Gold, Juno, Sword, Omaha, and Utah. Gold and Sword were covered by the British. Juno was covered by the Canadian Commonwealth, and then Omaha and Utah were covered by the superior USA forces. And you know, these vagabonds, I mean, I'm talking about, of course, the British and the Canadian Commonwealth. They decide that they're, you know, going to take the less challenging sections of the beach. You know, Gold, Juno, Sword, they were quite small time, as I would put it, when Omaha and Utah were the bigger, more superior, high-octane battles.
The main Allied plan here was to land as many troops as possible and establish a strong beachhead, of which they would break out into the beautiful French countryside.
So the British came up with Operation Fortitude, and this created the first fake army group commanded by General George S. Patton. This was used to deceive the Germans into believing that there was going to be an attack on places other than the beach. Like Calais.
With new video game technology, we'll be able to see a bird's eye view of the battlefield, how the battle was fought and won, and the view the generals wish they had.
The night before the attack on Normandy, the Allied air forces had dropped several divisions of troops onto the flanks of the beach. This was used so that the Germans could not get reinforcements during the battle. And so on one side of the beach over here, you have the American Air Force, you know, doing their thing over here. And then on the right side, or, you know, the other flank, we have the British Airborne.
The night of June 5th, the Allied assault had taken the German garrisons behind the beaches of Normandy completely by surprise, as thousands of paratroopers were dropped behind enemy lines. The Germans quickly opened fire with their anti-aircraft weapons to try to knock out as many Allied fighters and bombers as possible.
Now, Allied meteorologists had been searching for an invasion date, and they had discovered that on June 5th there would be an exceptionally bright full moon. But even better, on June 6th, the weather would prevail to allow for ideal landing conditions in which the Higgins boats could get up to the shore, drop off their troops, come back to the boats, go up to the shore again, drop off more troops, and keep the process rolling.
These Higgins boats were ideal for dropping off Allied troops close to the shores at Normandy so they can storm the beaches and find cover as soon as possible. These boats were designed for high tide and low tide to transport soldiers through and close to the beaches to land.
When the American forces arrived on Omaha Beach, which was a very heavily defended German position, they instantly became bogged down by machine gun fire. This type of fighting was often seen in my college days over at Harvard versus those jesters at Yale.
As the ramps dropped, the Allied soldiers would run forward through heavy machine gun fire and artillery rounds exploding near them to get somewhere onto the beach, find cover, and advance forward. The beach layout was designed to specifically stop any advancing boats to land men near or close to the shores of the beach, so they had to travel an even farther distance through obstacles stopping any boats advancing towards the beach.
When the ramp dropped and the troops stormed the beaches under heavy gunfire and looked to take cover, they had to carry 250-pound packs. I mean, these men had to be a different breed. Carrying this, they were just incredible men.
each Higgins boat was required to drop off a squad of men onto the beach, return back, pick up more men from the transport ships, and send them to the beach to compile as many soldiers they can onto the beach so they can push forward and establish a beachhead. But these men were under heavy fire and constant machine guns that the advancing forward would prove to be very difficult and costly for those Americans.
Now, a major innovation of the Normandy invasion, of course, was the United States of American-made Higgins boat. This contraption was a flat-bottomed landing craft that could go close to the shore before dropping its troops, and it had a drawbridge contraption on it that would allow the invading forces to go and storm to the mainland.
The Allied plan of putting as many soldiers onto the beach as possible was working, as even more boats dropped more soldiers onto the beach that would storm forward and advance towards the German positions overlooking the cliffs. Though it would prove very costly for the Americans as they advanced through the heavy obstacles on the beach under heavy machine gun fire as they continued forward.
On the day of the attack, the Allies made their assault on the beaches. The Canadians took much less defended beaches as compared to the Americans, who had a lot tougher times establishing a beachhead. After this, fighting ensued henceforth.
After being dropped off by the Higgins boats, the Allied soldiers now had to advance through heavy machine gun fire and artillery rounds to advance to the other side of the beach, even though they were taking heavy casualties. But instantly, they became bogged down by the heavy artillery and machine gun fire, and soon they would not be able to advance any further onto the beach, unless they had some support. But unfortunately for most of the Americans, most of their tanks had sunk in the English Channel or were destroyed by the 88mm artillery rounds that the Germans had. Without heavy support, the Americans still continued to advance forward under the artillery and machine gun fire, taking heavy casualties, and took refuge under anything they could find.
The German weapons consisted mostly of the German 88, which was originally an anti-aircraft weapon, converted into an anti-tank weapon. This would be fired upon the beach at the men, creating massive explosions, shrapnel everywhere. And then they also had the MG-42, which fired approximately 1,000 rounds per minute. And when the Germans would lay waste to the poor American troops, it would just create a hodgepodge of just death and disorder among the poor American troops. And this kind of defeat wasn't seen that often, except at most of the sporting events between the Yale men and those ragamuffins over at Harvard. They definitely have several tally marks on their loser chart.
The German MG-42, or Hitler's buzzsaw as the Allied soldiers used to call it, was the leading innovation in the German military and the standard heavy machine gun, but also the German 88mm anti-aircraft cannon was very deadly as they converted it to a new anti-tank round that would prove very valuable on the Eastern Front against the Soviet Union's T-34 tank that was laying waste to their Tigers and Panthers. The Germans before this had pre-sighted the entire beach with their for these 88s so they could rain down fire onto the beach. Also, the MG-42s were pre-ranged and pre-sighted, so just in case of an invasion they would be able to fire down upon the advancing Americans as they would struggle through all of this to get forward. The Allies on the beach faced these two new weapons at a severe cost to the men, as thousands would prove to be wounded or killed by these 88s and MG-42s. But nonetheless, the Allies kept advancing towards the beach, towards the shingle line, or barbed wire, where it divided the beach from the outlying cliffs. The shingle line, designated by the green arrows and the green line, would be the American soldiers' objective to take and regroup there so they could continue advancing towards the cliffs. The barbed wire would prove to be a tough obstacle to pass, as they would then have to bring up Mangalore torpedo mines to blow up the barbed wire, creating gaps in their lines so they can continue forward. up the cliffs. But they had to do all of this while under heavy machine gun fire.
Now, as the Americans continued their advance, despite heavy machine gun fire and being mowed down, they steadily made it all the way up to the shingle line. Now, essentially, the shingle line was a conglomeration of sticks and barbed wire. At this point, the American engineers brought up the Bangalore torpedoes and destroyed the shingle line, creating gaps in which the American soldiers could climb up the mountainside.
As the Allied soldiers regrouped upon the shingle line, they were taking heavy casualties from German bunkers and pillboxes on top of the cliffs. But at this time, they had enough soldiers that they could press forward up the steep cliffs. After they brought up the Mangalore torpedo mines, the engineers would have to plant them at the barbed wire. Despite heavy machine gun fire and artillery rounds taking severe casualties, they were able to blow the wire, creating a gap inside the shingle line, allowing for a hole up the way towards the cliffs. With this new hole created, the Allied soldiers continued forward under heavy machine gun fire up the cliffs, seeking anything they could for cover, while returning fire with more reinforcements coming from the beach that were landing. The Allies pretty soon had an advantage over the Germans, and soon the German positions began to fall apart as Allied soldiers began to advance forward, knocking out the German pillboxes and machine gun nests stationed on the cliffs. Soon the Allies had established a strong foot point, which then they would advance forward up the steep cliffs, firing back at the Germans, inflicting more casualties on the Germans, and creating a hole that the Allies would then use to slum up towards the tops of the cliffs. But one obstacle remained, as the German pillboxes still remained there, so engineers were brought up to blow the pillboxes away. After those had been knocked out, Allied reinforcements who were stranded on the beach could now advance forward. Their new objective was to take out the 88s that overlooked the beachhead. But as the Allies advanced forward, they discovered a series and network of dug-in trenches on the top of the cliffs that proved to be even more an obstacle than that on the beach. The Germans had constructed these so that they could defend the beachhead and move men around while defending against enemy artillery.
Once the Allied troops took the beaches and broke through the defensive, they climbed up on top of the cliffs, where a World War I style trench warfare began. Men were running all over the place, unorganized, and supplies did not get there fast enough. I mean, it was just really hectic for the men, and no one knew what to do.
The Germans defending Normandy fought to the last man as they tried to defend what they had left at the beaches, but soon more and more Germans were taken prisoner, killed, or wounded, and the defenses at Normandy for the Germans began to break. Heavy positions like MG pillboxes and machine gun nests were also being overrun by the Americans and taken out. The German defenses were beginning to crumble and break as the advancing Americans from the beach were advancing through these trenches and taking out heavy fortified positions. Once the MG-42 positions had been taken out, this allowed for more soldiers and supplies to be landed on the beach, and clearing a path for the 88s. Very few German defenders were able to fight or continue fighting. Those who did were either taken prisoner, killed, or wounded during the fighting, and the German defenses collapsed, and the Germans abandoned their trenches, allowing for the 88s to be destroyed, while the German soldiers ran away. The German soldiers would regroup outside the beaches of Normandy, but for the battle at Normandy, it was over, and the Allies had established a foothold in France, allowing for victory.
The Allies were able to establish a beachfront and push the Germans back into France and eventually take France, and then go into Germany and end World War II once and for all. This is the final decisive battle. I'm Matthew Settle signing off. Thank you for watching. Holy buckets, it's Frank Rosendorf.
Can you read that, Brody?
Is it? Brian, it's filming.
Can you read that? Here. Go over here this time. Let's see.
Oh, okay, yeah. Change. Let's see. How's that look? That's pretty good. Because Operation Fortitude created.
It's going right.
Basically.
Alright, so I just say Operation Fortitude was created. This was the first, or...
No.
fake first. This was the first fake army.
No. The British came up with a plan called Operation Fortitude, which would create the fake First Army Group, commanded by George S. Patton.
And that's all I say.
Yeah.
And then say it was to trick the
Germans.
Germans into thinking there was going to be an attack on Calais.
Yeah.
Alright.
This has been recording too, so go.
So the British came up with Operation Fortitude, and this created the first fake army group commanded by General George S. Patton. This was used to deceive the Germans into believing that there was going to be an attack on places other than the beach. Like Calais.
I was ready to get started on that.
Alright.
Going.
The Allies took France and established a beachfront.
Beachfront.
And this...
Oh, I got to knock that one.
Rolling.
New video game technology. We'll see a bird's eye view of the action. Jesus.